Does your commuter rail system have one line? That one line that just stands out from the rest of the system for one reason or another? Whether it be due to short length, low ridership, odd placement, or just straight up different. Well, I'm here to point out this line, go over its history, explain why it's so odd, and what can be done to fix it. All of this and more in this episode of Fixing Your Branch Line. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fixing Your Branch Line, the series where I casually call out a branch line for being somewhat different, go over its history and flaws, and suggest what can be done to fix it. Since I covered my home road in the last episode, I might as well cover the LIRR's sister agency next, Metro North. Established in 1983, this commuter railroad was created by the New York MTA to take over commuter rail operations in upstate New York and western Connecticut when Conrail announced they would no longer provide commuter services. Even though they were still government-owned at the time, come on guys, I thought you were supposed to uphold rail service no matter what, with Metro North having four main routes, or divisions as I'll refer them to. The Erie Division along the former Erie trackage west of the Hudson River, the Hudson and Harlem Divisions along former New York Central trackage going upstate and east of the Hudson, and the New Haven Division along, you guessed it, former New Haven trackage. Come to think of it, that railroad had pretty much of a monopoly on rail service in that state, with literally the only exception being the Central Vermont starting from New London, and of course not counting the countless streetcar lines throughout the state which were also owned by the New Haven, which, if taken correctly, could bring you from New York City to Boston by streetcar alone. But that's besides the point. Of course, I wanted to choose one of the three branch lines in the New Haven division since most of the time there's shuttle services that connects with a larger main line, the textbook definition of a branch line. Well, not really, but you get my point. And no, I didn't count the Wassaic branch since that's technically part of the Harlem line. And spoiler alert, I did not choose this line as an honorable mention. The winner of that award is going to surprise you. So, of the three Connecticut branch lines that serve Metro North, I made the very tough decision to choose the Waterbury branch. This route is the only one which still uses low-level platforms, only has shuttle service from Bridgeport with no direct trains to Grand Central Terminal whatsoever. It's the furthest branch away from Grand Central, with Bridgeport being 55 miles east, and also has one of the lowest frequencies and ridership numbers on the system. Of course, the line has gone back and forth with abandonment threats and community support, and it has plenty of areas where it can improve, but has made significant progress in recent years. But before we dive into all that, might as well go over a bit of history of the once mighty Waterbury branch. In order to understand the history of the present-day Waterbury branch, we must understand why Waterbury is a significant city in the state of Connecticut, as it was home to a massive Union Station. As a matter of fact, the building gained the name Union Station since it initially housed 5 different railroads that would go to multiple destinations from the town, all of which would later be absorbed by the New York, New Haven, and Hartford, also known as the New Haven. To put it shortly, Waterbury was a crossroads station with service to Winsted, Danbury, Meriden, Hartford, and Bridgeport, but passenger service only remains to the last of these destinations, so this is the section we'll be covering for this episode. Service on this line commenced in 1849 by the Naugatuck Railroad, named after the river the tracks run parallel to, with initial service between Bridgeport and
Well, Seymour, I made it, despite your directions.
starting on May 15th, then extending to Waterbury on June 11th, and finally the rest of the way to Winsted on September 24th, where it interchanged with the Central New England Railway. This railroad, and eventually all others in the region, was leased by the New Haven in 1887 and was eventually purchased by it in 1906, with the branch seeing mostly shuttle service where passengers can transfer from mainline trains at Bridgeport to the sporadic branch lines of the same railroad at Waterbury, such as the Nutmeg, which ran directly from Waterbury to Boston, with the one route service on this branch being the Naugatuck, running from Grand Central to Winsted. The line would see many freight trains serving the many factories along the line, as it provided somewhat scenic views of the Naugatuck River, but the New Haven Railroad was notoriously in frequent financial turmoil and constantly considered cutting service on many of these lines. This wasn't helped by the flood of '55 when multiple hurricanes caused severe damage to many of these upstate lines, which caused many of them to be shut down because of this. Just before Waterbury's connection to the main line was about to be shut down along with other upstate Connecticut lines under ownership of the New Haven successor, Penn Central, the state of Connecticut took over passenger operations of these lines just in time in 1970 as Penn Central filed one of the largest corporate bankruptcies in the history of America. Technically, the state leased these services to Penn Central and later Conrail since they were subsidized, but the MTA would completely take over this line and others in the region in 1981 with Metro North being formed 2 years later to formally operate these services. Another reason as to why I specifically chose the Waterbury branch for this episode is that this branch in particular saw some of the most diverse power throughout the CDOT and Metro North era, including leased Amtrak RDCs and SPV 2000s, Shoreline East GP40s and Maversa coaches, P40s leased from Amtrak and SLE, the last running grounds for FP10s and FL9s, some of which double-heading only 2 coaches, and an LBSCR E2. Well, not really. This is part of the Railroad Museum of New England in Thomaston, which runs along the Torrington secondary of the present-day Naugatuck Railroad, the freight operator of the museum. And of course, this doesn't include a number of fan trips to Waterbury, one of which including equipment from my home railroad and was included in said railroad's iceberg video. Like the last episode, passenger service on this branch has been viewed by its owners as it always has been for the most part, a shuttle service. Equipment assigned to this branch has become a bit less diverse in recent years, with the average train consisting of about 5 coaches and a P32 or Brookville BL20. Impressively, it retains all of its original stations on the 28.5-mile long line, including Derby Shelton, Ansonia,
Seymour,
Beacon Falls, Naugatuck, and Waterbury, ever since the line opened in 1849. Except Union City, but that's not a passenger station in the 1955 New Haven timetable, so it doesn't count. Although today, it doesn't have any freight interference to worry about, since the New Haven, then Boston and Maine, then Guilford freight service between Waterbury and Derby ceased operation when all of the factories along the line shut down, and most of the business and economic prosperity that came with it all but vanished. Also, like the last episode, the line is mostly single-tracked, but has multiple sidings throughout the branch which are remnants of when the line was fully double-tracked. How do I know the line was fully double-tracked at one point? 1. The 1955 New Haven Railroad timetable shows the line is double-tracked as indicated by the 2 lines up to
Seymour.
And 2. Instead of looking at a somewhat large right-of-way and calculating where a second track could fit, all I have to do is go towards the beginning of the branch near Derby and look at this! Since this branch line has a lot of overpasses, let me explain a very important key concept in this series which will come up again in future episodes. A bridge is what I like to call the ultimate determinator. Why? Because it determines how many tracks a line had at one point in its history. Basically, the number of slots available on a bridge indicates how many tracks ran through the area, even if there are currently fewer tracks intact than the amount of space available on the bridge, and it therefore shows that the line is able to fit whatever amount of tracks could fit on the bridge. This bridge here not only confirms the southern half of the Waterbury branch being double-tracked in the past, but it makes this determination even easier by having 2 steel structures for each track. Now some of you may be asking, that's a good sign, but what about the next bridge literally 3 seconds later? This leads to another key concept in the series. The bridge's base is the only way to override an ultimate determinator, since even if half of a bridge is dismantled for some reason, its base still indicates how many tracks the right-of-way can fit. Now the 1955 map says the section between Seymour and Waterbury is single-tracked, but this is in fact false, since there are plenty of sections where a second track is still visible, as well as a small bridge which has room for a second track near Naugatuck, and another bridge whose base suggests a second track at one point in the same town. And before you ask, the suspension bridge at Seymour has room for 2 tracks on the north end, and the bases would have to be reconstructed to add a second track. As mentioned earlier, all of the stations on this branch are low level, with the exception of the terminus station in Waterbury. Now before we review this station, I would like to make this scenario. Look at this fantastic station in this quaint little town. Such detail, such grandiose scale, such practicality. Truly a symbol of American architecture at its finest. Oh wait, you thought that big clock tower is the station I'm referring to? Why no, silly. That's the Waterbury station. But hey, at least it has a high-level platform. Technically, the Waterbury Union Station building was closed to passengers in 1958, and it was bought by a newspaper company, and passengers just used the low-level platform until this new station was constructed in 2015, which can only fit 1.5 cars. When compared to the new platform, the original Union Station had a total of 3 passenger tracks served by a side platform next to the station house and an island platform in the middle. The new platform is just south of the island platform facing west, but the extended parking lot covers the other 2 inner passenger tracks. Going further south along the line, most of the stations in general are slight downgrades of their original forms and only have one side platform. Enter Exhibit B. Look at this lovely station just south of Waterbury. It's so good that they turned it into a multi-purpose space too. I must say, the design of the station is a tribute to simple station design with a touch of modernity. Truly, this is the pride of Naugatuck, Connecticut. Oh wait, you thought I was talking about that restaurant? Why no, silly. That's a Naugatuck station. But hey, at least it serves buses too. The Waterbury branch has been going back and forth between budget cuts and service upgrades, with many proposed state budgets trying to cut funding for the line, while others increase frequencies and train lengths over the years. Also, remember last episode when I covered the Trans-Regional Express plan to convert the West Hempstead and Oyster Bay branches into light rail lines? The only other commuter route which was listed for light rail conversion was the Waterbury branch, which is yet another reason why I chose to review this line for this episode. Whereas LRV conversion would be ideal for the West Hempstead branch since it would be connecting two busy main lines, do I necessarily think LRV conversion would be the most beneficial option for the Waterbury branch? No. The reason why I wouldn't necessarily go for a light rail conversion for this line is because at the moment, it's not serving any rail connection at the other end of the branch. A West Hempstead branch LRV would make sense because even if they would build infrastructure that's not compatible with the existing rolling stock, it would still be serving as a connection between two main lines. Meanwhile, a non-compatible LRV conversion would not only have no rail connections at Waterbury, but it would also prevent any further passenger and freight expansion from the New Haven main line to all points north. One such example would be possible restoration or expansion of service from Waterbury to Hartford, such as the main line to Hartford through service, which would be hindered by incompatible light rail at Waterbury. Speaking of which, there have been many calls for Waterbury to Hartford service, but this may be more difficult since Pan Am South, Berkshire, and Eastern operates freight on the route, and CT Transit provides bus service somewhat along the same route, with the section between New Britain and Hartford being shamelessly paved over the New Haven right-of-way, thus resulting in no said passenger rail service from Waterbury to the capital city anytime soon. Oh? Looks like there are plans for passenger rail on the line. Yes! But in the meantime, I'm not the only one who thinks LRV conversion isn't the best idea for this route, as there has thankfully been a lot of support for this branch in recent months, as funding has just been secured to increase frequencies from 15 trains a day to 22 by utilizing 2 sets on the branch instead of 1, with the second set using the many sidings along the branch thanks to Centralized Train Control, or CTC. This is also why I've held off reviewing the timetable for this branch until now, since it's going into effect in less than a month from when this video was uploaded, so I cover a soon-to-be obsolete schedule. Based on this new timetable, frequencies seem to be once every 2 hours, which is pretty good, but CDOT stated they may increase frequencies from this as well. Not only that, but they're also going to convert the existing stations with high-level platforms, and are even looking into electrifying this branch along with the Danbury branch. Now, electrifying the latter of these two makes sense since the Danbury branch was electrified at one point and a good amount of the infrastructure still exists, but such a project has never been attempted on the Waterbury branch. So with all of these needed improvements on this line coming to fruition, what is my official diagnosis on the Waterbury branch? If I had to place the most emphasis on one solution, it would be insert second track here. Considering that this is one of the few examples where a branch is being actively worked on for improvements in recent years, with one of these improvements specifically being more trains in addition to the current timetable, I suggest double tracking the line wherever possible, so this way more trains can easily pass each other instead of having to wait on sidings. I would also suggest extending the existing platforms so that they can fit 3 cars, as well as adding second platforms near towns where trains are scheduled to meet, with the current high-level platform at Waterbury becoming an island platform with options for a third side platform for increased service at the station, such as a rail museum connection to Torrington, which for some reason doesn't exist, or any other new service to Waterbury. Which leads me to my next point, through service. I would suggest at least one through Grand Central to Waterbury train in each direction, and if possible, a New York to Hartford through service that could connect with Amtrak, and maybe even continue with Hartford to Boston service if that line were to be restored. Lastly, if there is still an interest, I would suggest electrifying the line after double tracking is complete, so this way catenary poles aren't tragically placed where the second track used to be. If implemented, the line would see the same benefits of EMUs on Shoreline East, including newer railcars, quicker acceleration, and no emissions. Any of these enhancements will be a significant improvement for the route, and it's encouraging to know that instead of leaving the branch in an inconvenient, derelict condition, There are people at Metro North and CDOT who are actively working to upgrade the line to better serve mid-state Connecticut. Now, I mentioned earlier that you would be surprised by the pick for honorable mention, and that the Wassaic branch would not be chosen since it's technically part of the Harlem line. So who is the honorable mention for this episode of Fixing Your Branch Line? Well, that honor goes to the Pascagoula Valley line. What? You thought I was going to review one of the other Connecticut branches because I focused on the Waterbury line? Well, just for you, I'll review the other two branches in one sentence. Restore Woodway, otherwise perfect. Restore Georgetown and Wall Street, and bring forth the wires. All of which are currently being considered by CDOT. Yes! Technically shared by both Metro North and New Jersey Transit, this branch line is one of the shortest in the Metro North system at only 6 miles long with only 3 stations. Now you can argue that this is really a New Jersey Transit line that is operated by Metro North when in New York, but it still uses Metro North equipment and appears on the Metro North map, so therefore it qualifies as a Metro North branch. This line originally opened in 1858 as the Hackensack and New York Railroad before becoming the New Jersey and New York Railroad, which later became an operating subsidiary of the Erie Railroad in 1896. The line also ran to New City and Haverstraw, New York, although service would usually be split at Spring Valley, with some trains going to Haverstraw and others going to Suffern, where it would meet up with the Erie Main Line. Eventually, service was cut back to Spring Valley sometime in the 1960s, before the line would be taken over by NJDOT and then New Jersey Transit. Even though the Erie Railroad map indicates the line was single-tracked, multiple photos along this branch as well as its half-empty right-of-way show that it was in fact double-tracked, but only one track currently remains with multiple sidings throughout the branch, which psychs you into thinking that a double-track right-of-way is about to start and then goes back to single-track to crush your hopes. I will say, I must applaud this branch for having very good frequencies to Spring Valley, with about 1 train per hour, as well as a Peak Express Metro North service from Hoboken right to Pearl River, but the multiple sidings could likely result in complicated timing and slight delays. Also, 3 random stations in New York State which are close to the New Jersey border are okay, but they don't connect to any other rail service, even though Suffern is right there and will be much easier to restore service to than Haverstraw. So for the New Jersey side, my official diagnosis for the Pascagoula Valley branch would be insert second track here, and adjust any stations and platforms that could block a second track for a much easier flow of traffic. And the New York side would be return to Suffern, to have a better connection with the Port Jervis line. The right-of-way still exists for the Suffern or Piermont branch as it was called, but since the yard for this line is along the former Haverstraw branch, maybe it might be easier to restore service on this branch first. This is why we can't have nice things. As soon as the railroad right-of-way is available, someone places either a storage building or a housing development right in the middle of the line. Well, looks like we'll have to reroute this. But following this right-of-way on this rail guide app, it looks like the rest of this branch wouldn't be too bad. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, I'll get back to you with a new alignment for the Haverstraw section. This looks like it'll take a bit more work than expected. Thank you all for watching this episode of Fixing Your Branch Line. This episode in particular took a bit longer to make since I had to survey a much longer branch line with fewer online resources and had to consider multiple possibilities and their effect on the surrounding rail network. Likewise, I also had to make a difficult decision to choose these 2 lines to review in the first place, since I had to survey all of these lines first and then choose which one I should cover. But I feel I did a good job reviewing this branch overall, as it involved more alternatives and introduced key concepts that would appear later in the series. Out of all the branches that Metro North has, I ultimately chose the Waterbury branch for this episode due to its diverse range of equipment, once Grand Terminus station, and current plans to enhance the line. And I also chose the Pascagoula Valley branch as an honorable mention to lead into the next railroad to be covered in the series, which is neighboring New Jersey Transit. But until then, thank you again for watching. Credit for all the photographs used go to their respective photographers, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Have a good day.
See